Well, we're on a walk in Maine today. It's 50 degrees out for December 31st. That's kind of bizarre. Got Pink the Wonder Dog. He's doing some heavy sniffing. He hasn't been down here for a little bit. Oh, there's people running around the track without shirts on even. Wow. It is warm. See, they've been cutting some trees here. Trees that have died. We seem to have a lot of birch that seem like they grow to a certain age and then they die. You know, kind of quicker than other trees. I don't know. Here's another one that needs to be removed. My camera's being pulled by the dog here. There we go. And there's, if you look down, there's one that's partially fallen across the trail. So that will be cut up soon. They have a trail organization. Oh, I forget the name. I'll find it. That tends a lot of trails. The Gorham Trail Association joined with the Portland Trail Association, kind of absorbed into it. And they do a good job. This short piece here of the Robert Fraser Trail could be done by someone in a wheelchair. Sometimes I look at that and just think, what about if my wife wanted to come out with me in her motorized wheelchair? Of course, you wouldn't come out when it's mud because it will stick. I mean, I suppose I could get chains for the drive wheels of her wheelchair or make some smaller ones. Birch trees are so amazing. The bark has different chemicals in it that they feel may actually be useful against cancer. There's a fungus that grows on old birch trees when they're still alive, but they're older and they've lost some of their immunity. It's called chaga. And besides concentrating some of the chemicals in the bark into the mushroom itself, it also creates some new ones. And it has a long traditional use as a immune support thing. People take it and you kind of, make tea with it. And it definitely tastes like you're drinking a stump. That's what I found from trying it. But I guess like anything else, it's an acquired taste. And, if you live in an area where it's really abundant, you would be out and you could have a supply of it wherever you were or whenever you needed it. Now it's worth so much. Here in the U.S., people just grab it wherever they see it, they steal it off people's land. And since they can go for upwards to $25 a pound, and it's a very heavy fungus, people do, steal it, take it off lands that don't belong to them. I mean, when you're talking something like that, you've got a 10-pound massive chaga, that's $750 worth of materials you're taking. So that is not the right thing to do. There's been some effort to farm it, and I'm not sure how well those have gone. I haven't, checked into the literature, but normally the tree has to still be alive, so it isn't just a matter of, like with some mushrooms that decomposed, you get dead wood, you sterilize it, or maybe you don't even sterilize it, you inoculate it with so much of the fungus that it will just outcompete anything else that's going to grow in that log. But they haven't had success with that. Morel mushrooms normally have to grow in association with certain broadleaf trees like elm, and there's been the big die-off of elm trees. And people have successfully I have to turn around when the dog winds the leash around me. They have successfully trained them to grow on dead material, but they don't taste that good. Evidently, from what I've heard, anyone who's eaten the real wild grown on their own mushrooms of the moral type say the taste is remarkably different than those farmed. Which people have that same complaint against salmon and trout even, that because of the food that's fed them, they just don't have the same taste as wild caught trout or salmon. You know, I was reading a magazine and they're talking about an interesting concept. Organic gardening and high-intensive modern agriculture. They're the two opposite sides of the poles. One uses no chemicals and one uses a lot. You know, in the organic, sometimes you're growing different numbers of plants together. Intensive agriculture is monocropal. In other words, monocrop, they grow one thing, like, you know, I could find you acres of corn in the area here. But so rather than go to these two extremes, they're now talking about maximizing biological factors so that less fertilizer is used. And this is like a win-win approach. If let's say we have a farmer, he's growing corn, maybe he has cattle, maybe he's raising it for human consumption, whatever. But, you know, he has this field that he uses, you know, and he rotates crops on it, plants it with, you know, nitrogen-bearing things, you know, that replenish the soil and goes through all that. That in itself actually would reduce some of the fertilizer needed, but maximizing other biological control measures might greatly reduce the fertilizer or insecticide that's needed. You figure if you have a body of water nearby, or you make one, you put up bat houses. You know, bats eat a lot of insects. You plant around your crop and encourage things like orb spiders to make their nets, their webs, that catch a lot of these insects. So there's different things that can be done. I mean, those are just surface comments there, but there's a lot of things you can do with actually seeding your crop with biological factors such as fungus that's beneficial, different organisms that eat the target pest for your crop, and all kinds of things to make the demand for fertilizer decrease enormously. Obviously warmer than usual. You know, the question is, if global warming is happening, what will that do for agriculture? Well, generally, for the specific type of crop you grow, if the earth gets warmer, you'd be moving agriculture north, where it's still a cooler temperature. So you could see that, say, some of the crops that we grow in the United States now might have to be grown in Canada instead. But that also means that crops that were grown in Mexico, we can now grow in the United States. So it isn't like it creates a vacuum of food. What is more perplexing would be the idea that it might change rain patterns. In other words, some people believe that rain is moving from over continents to over the ocean. So if you depend, of course, on water for agriculture, you know, the rain's providing most of it. That's not good news. But I don't know. Sometimes I don't think they necessarily link that directly to, you know, the global warming, climate change idea. But that is one factor that all of a sudden, you know, Maine, I live in, I think they break zone 5 down into 2 slots. So I'm in the slightly warmer one where I might grow some things where people in the rest of zone 5 might not. So, you know, if more global warming happens, Maine might become zone 6. And so some of the things that need really cold weather and a really long chill time may not grow as well. And apples are something that need a period of so many cold days, or they're just not going to do as well. They're not going to produce as many apples, and your harvest is going to go down, and eventually, there'll be no profit in planting more apple trees because they just won't produce in the weather we have. So it is important for certain crops to have extended chill periods. And I don't know blueberries. Of course, Maine's famous for blueberries. I don't know whether that, and the wild ones, the small bush with the smaller berries that taste 100 times better than the big ones you buy that look kind of like blue marbles. The small ones taste way better. But so would that mean, again, that we'd maybe have to shift the crop to, maybe we can grow cranberries instead? I don't know. But there could be a shifting of crops, but not necessarily, losing the amount of food volume that you can produce. But we'll see what happens, or we won't see. These changes are so subtle that we probably won't know for quite a period. And there are some climatologist type people who are predicting that this has to do with sunspot activity and things, that we're actually going to go into a brief mini ice age. In other words, not everything isn't going to turn to ice, but we're going to have a couple years where it is extremely cold, where it noticeably something has changed with the weather. Not just, it's 50 degrees in Maine in December 31st in Gorham. It's going to be like, we can't plant our crops in Maine because it's July and we're still getting frost. They're going to die. So that's interesting, that prediction, but it's not a classic ice age that's going to last for 1,000 years, and big sheets of ice are going to come down from the poles and push all the rocks away and smother everything, which man has lived through before. But it's just going to be a cold, intense period. They've had them in the past. So one of the famous cases, and I don't have the exact date in my mind right now, but the River Thames froze over, and that had never happened before, at least in the memory of those people. And it was quite the thing that they actually had ice they could skate on rather than flowing water. So it's an adventure living on Earth as a human, and we're pretty resourceful in what we do and what we can do when we actually have our backs to the wall. Aren't we, Pink? Huh? Yeah.